Welcome to the world of entrepreneurship, a world filled with dreams, risks, and endless possibilities. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff with nothing but your idea. You believe it will change lives. You feel the fire of passion in your chest. But below you lies a valley of uncertainty. How do you leap without falling? How do you build something meaningful when the future is unknown? This is the reality every entrepreneur faces. In today's fast-moving world, we see new products launched every day. Some rise like rockets. Others vanish before we even notice them. Think about social networks that disappeared, apps that no one downloaded, or gadgets that gathered dust. Why does this happen? Is it because the founders were not smart? No. Many of them were brilliant. The real reason is that they built without learning. They invested years, money, and energy in products that nobody wanted. Eric Ries, the author of The Lean Startup, faced this problem himself. He was a passionate software engineer who wanted to build something revolutionary, but he learned the hard way that passion alone is not enough. He saw products fail even after years of work. He asked himself, could there be a smarter way to build startups? A way that saves time, reduces waste, and gives a real chance of success. Out of that struggle, the Lean Startup method was born. The Lean Startup is not just a book of theories. It is a guide born from real experiences. It is based on lessons from both failures and successes. It teaches that a startup is not about following a strict business plan. It is about testing ideas quickly, learning from customers, and adapting fast. Instead of spending years perfecting something in isolation, the Lean Startup says, go out, talk to people, put your idea in front of them, and learn what really works at its heart. This method is about validated learning. That means proving with evidence whether your idea works or not. It is about replacing guesswork with knowledge, and ego with humility. Instead of asking, am I right? You ask, what can I learn? This approach is not only for Silicon Valley. It is for anyone. Whether you want to start a small shop, launch a global app, or bring change in a nonprofit organization, Lean Startup gives you tools to move forward. It speaks to dreamers and doers in every corner of the world. The book is divided into 3 main parts: Vision, Steer, and Accelerate. Vision explains the foundation, why startups exist, how to define them, and what their true purpose is. Steer focuses on the process of testing, measuring, and making decisions. Accelerate shows how to scale and build continuous innovation. Together, these parts create a complete map for the entrepreneurial journey. This journey is not easy. But with Lean Startup principles, the path becomes clearer. You will still face uncertainty, but now you will know how to learn from it. You will still make mistakes, but those mistakes will guide you faster toward success. As you listen to this summary, remember that these are not just lessons for business. They are lessons for life. They remind us that we must always stay curious, always test our beliefs, and always be ready to adapt. So let us begin. Part 1. Vision. This is where every startup story starts. With an idea, with a dream, with the challenge of turning uncertainty into opportunity. Part 1. Vision. Every great journey begins with a vision, a spark of imagination that says, what if? What if this idea could solve a problem? What if it could change the way people live? What if it could become something bigger than just a dream? This is the birthplace of every startup. But between the dream and reality lies a long and uncertain road. In the old days, business leaders believed in making long plans, raising huge amounts of money, and building a finished product before ever showing it to customers. They believed success came from prediction and control. But today's world is different. Technology changes fast, customer needs shift quickly, and competition is everywhere. The old way no longer works. This is why Eric Ries created the Lean Startup method. It is a way of building businesses that embraces uncertainty instead of fearing it. It says that you do not need to know everything at the start. You only need to know how to learn. The goal is not to build the perfect product on day one. The goal is to create a process that helps you discover what customers truly want, step by step. At the heart of Lean Startup is a simple cycle. Build, measure, learn. First, you build a small version of your idea, called a minimum viable product. Then you measure how customers respond. Finally, you learn from the results and decide whether to continue, adjust, or completely change direction. This cycle repeats again and again, guiding the startup toward real progress. This is different from the traditional mindset. Instead of asking, "Can we build this?" Lean Startup asks, "Should we build this?" and "Will customers care about it?" That small change in questions makes all the difference. It saves time, prevents waste, and increases the chance of success. But before we can learn, before we can test, before we can measure anything, we must first understand what a startup truly is. A startup is not just a small version of a big company. It is a unique kind of organization, designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. That definition is important because it tells us that a startup's true mission is not just building. It is learning how to build a sustainable business. This part of the book, called Vision, will show us how to begin. It will answer the question, why do startups exist? It will guide us to define what really matters. And it will teach us how to use learning as the foundation for progress. Vision is where the journey begins. It is where founders take their leap of faith, and where every entrepreneur must decide what they believe in. But belief alone is not enough. Belief must be tested, refined, and sometimes even challenged. Only then can it become a reality. So let us move forward into the first chapter. Start. Here we explore how every idea takes its first breath, and how the Lean Startup way helps us begin not with blind hope, but with clarity and purpose. Chapter 1. Start. Every journey has a beginning. For a startup, that beginning is the moment when an idea is born. Sometimes it comes like a flash of lightning, a sudden realization that something in the world could be better. Sometimes it grows slowly, like a seed planted deep inside the mind, nurtured by curiosity and frustration until it demands to be acted upon. No matter how it appears, the first step of a startup is always the same. A founder stands at the edge of uncertainty and chooses to begin. Most entrepreneurs believe their idea is brilliant. They see the final product in their imagination, shining with perfection. They picture customers lining up, investors calling them, and headlines celebrating their success. This vision is powerful. It gives courage. It fuels long nights of work. But vision without direction is dangerous. Because in reality, many startups fail not from lack of effort, but from building something that nobody wants. Eric Ries calls this the startup paradox. Founders are full of energy and belief, but they often pour it into the wrong things. They spend years polishing features, designing logos, or creating marketing campaigns before ever testing if the core idea is valid. By the time they face the real customer, it is often too late. The Lean Startup offers a different way to start. Instead of assuming you know the answers, treat your idea as a hypothesis. Ask yourself, what is the riskiest assumption here? What must be true for this business to work? Then design a way to test it quickly. The test does not need to be perfect. In fact, perfection is the enemy of progress. The goal is simply to learn whether your vision stands on solid ground. Take the example of an online shoe store. The traditional way would be to build a full website, stock thousands of shoes, and invest in warehouses. The Lean Startup way asks, what if we first post photos of shoes online? When someone orders, we go to a store, buy the shoes, and ship them. This simple test proves whether people are willing to buy shoes on the internet before millions are wasted. That is the essence of starting lean. To start does not mean to build everything. It means to begin learning. Each startup is like a car at the starting line. The engine is ready. The driver is eager. But before pressing the accelerator, you must know where the road leads. Otherwise, you risk speeding in the wrong direction. The early stage of a startup is full of uncertainty, but it is also full of opportunity. When you start lean, you are free to adjust. You can respond to feedback, shift your focus, and discover paths that were invisible at first. Starting small does not mean thinking small. It means building the foundation for something much bigger. This chapter reminds us that the act of starting is not about launching a polished product. It is about launching a journey of discovery. A startup is not defined by how much it builds in the first month, but by how much it learns. The faster you start learning, the faster you move toward real success. And that brings us to the next step. If starting is about taking the first leap into uncertainty, then the next challenge is to define what exactly a startup is. Why does it exist? What is its true purpose? Without a clear definition, we risk losing direction before the journey has even begun. In the next chapter, Define, we will explore this deeper and uncover the meaning that guides every startup forward. Chapter 2, Define. Once the journey begins, the next step is clarity. What exactly is a startup? Is it simply a new company with a small office and a handful of people? Is it a project with investors and a product in development? Or is it something else entirely, without definition? The word startup becomes vague, and founders risk chasing the wrong goals. Eric Ries gives us a precise and powerful definition. A startup is a human institution designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Let us break this down. First, a startup is a human institution. It is not just technology or code or machinery. At the heart of every startup are people. People with ideas, people with skills, people with hopes, and people who take risks. This means that a startup is built on relationships, trust, and shared belief. Second, a startup exists to create something new, not to copy what already exists, not to follow the safe path, but to explore uncharted territory. That new thing could be a product, a service, a platform, or even a new way of organizing work. The startup is born out of innovation. Third, a startup always lives in uncertainty. There is no clear map, no guarantee of success. The conditions are extreme because nobody knows if the idea will work. Competitors may appear. Customers may react differently than expected. Technology may fail. Or the market may change overnight. This definition matters because it shifts focus. If a startup is about uncertainty, then its main job is not just building products. Its true mission is to learn how to build a sustainable business. This is a radical idea. Instead of measuring progress by how many features are built or how many hours are worked. Lean Startup says progress is measured by learning. Think about it. A startup could spend years building a beautiful app, but if customers do not want it, nothing has been achieved. On the other hand, if a startup tests an idea in a few weeks, learns what customers care about, and adjusts, then real progress has been made. Defining the startup also helps set priorities. If learning is the goal, then experiments, feedback, and adaptation become central. The team can stop obsessing over vanity metrics like website traffic or press coverage. Instead, they can focus on validated learning. This gives meaning to every action. Definition also creates alignment. In the chaos of a new venture, people often have different visions. One founder may dream of fast growth. Another may want steady profit. A third may care about social impact. Without clarity, the team moves in different directions. But with a shared definition, the startup becomes united in purpose. This clarity even helps with external partners, investors, advisors, and employees can all understand that the goal is not blind growth, but learning. With this understanding, they are more patient with experiments, more supportive of pivots, and more committed to the mission. So we see that definition is not a technical detail. It is the compass that guides the journey. Without it, startups wander aimlessly. With it, they gain focus and resilience. But clarity alone is not enough. A startup must act, and its actions must be guided by evidence. The question then becomes, how do we actually learn? How do we transform uncertainty into knowledge? How do we test ideas in the real world? This takes us to the next chapter, learn. Here we will discover that the core activity of every startup is not building, but learning. And this learning must be validated through real experiments with real people. Only then can a startup move forward with confidence. Chapter 3. Learn. At the core of every startup lies one central activity, learning. Not learning in the classroom sense, but learning from the real world, from customers, from experiments, and from failures. The true purpose of a startup is not just to build products or services. It is to learn how to create a sustainable business. This is what Eric Ries calls validated learning. It is not about guesses. It is not about assumptions. It is learning that is tested, measured, and proven with evidence. Every feature you build, every campaign you launch, every dollar you spend, should teach you something about your customers and your business. The danger for most entrepreneurs is the illusion of progress. A team may feel busy, writing code, attending meetings, polishing designs, and talking to investors. But busyness is not the same as progress. True progress is only made when you learn what actually works. Think of a startup like a scientist in a lab. The scientist does not know the answer in advance. They form a hypothesis, design an experiment, and test it. If the result proves the hypothesis wrong, that is not failure. It is learning. And with each cycle, knowledge grows. A startup must operate the same way. Consider an example. Imagine a team building an app for language learning. They believe that people want daily reminders to practice, so they spend months coding a complex reminder system, but when they launch, they discover that most users turn the reminders off. The feature was a waste. Now imagine a leaner approach. Instead of building the whole system, the team sends simple daily emails for 2 weeks to test the idea. If people respond positively, then they build more. If not, they save time and effort. This is validated learning in action. Learning also requires honesty. Many entrepreneurs fall in love with their ideas. They look for numbers that confirm their beliefs instead of facing reality. They rely on vanity metrics, like total downloads, total signups, or total likes. These numbers may look impressive, but they do not tell whether the business is truly growing. Validated learning demands facing hard truths. It asks, are customers really using the product? Are they coming back? Are they willing to pay? This mindset turns mistakes into opportunities. A failed experiment is not wasted, because it teaches what does not work. And each lesson brings the startup closer to finding what does. Failure without learning is a loss. Failure with learning is progress. Learning is also a cultural shift. It means creating a team that values curiosity over certainty, humility over ego, and evidence over opinion. In such a culture, people are not afraid to admit mistakes, because mistakes become fuel for growth. So far, in part 1, we have seen that starting a startup is not about perfect prediction. It is about starting small. Then we defined what a startup really is. A human institution built to create something new under uncertainty. And now we see that its purpose is to learn. But learning alone is not enough. We must know how to direct that learning. We must decide which experiments to run, how to measure them, and how to use the results to steer our company. That is the next stage of the journey. This brings us to next part. Part 2. Steer. A startup is like a car. The engine is running. The driver is ready. But the question is, which direction should it go? If the car moves without steering, it may end up in the wrong place no matter how fast it travels. The same is true for startups. Starting is important. but without guidance, the energy can be wasted. Steering in a startup means turning learning into action. It means running experiments, testing ideas, measuring results, and making decisions based on evidence. The lean startup method gives a clear process for this, instead of driving blindly. Founders can adjust their course again and again until they find the right path. In this part of the book, we will learn how to steer effectively. We will see why experiments are the foundation of progress, how leaps of faith must be tested, how measuring the right things leads to truth, and how startups must decide between pivoting or persevering. This stage is practical. It is where the vision meets reality, and it is where the future of a startup is shaped. Because steering well does not guarantee success, but steering badly almost always guarantees failure. So let us move into the first step of steering. Chapter 4. Experiment. Here we will explore how startups can treat every action as an experiment, and how small tests can reveal big truths about what customers really want. Chapter 4. Experiment. When most people hear the word experiment, they imagine scientists in white coats mixing chemicals in a lab. But in the world of startups, an experiment is something different. It is not about discovering natural laws, but about testing ideas of how a business should work. An experiment is the bridge between vision and reality. It is how we transform guesses into knowledge. Every startup begins with a set of assumptions. Founders believe they know what customers want, how they will behave, and why the product will succeed. But these are only guesses until they are tested in the real world. The lean startup method tells us that instead of building a perfect product first and then hoping it will succeed, we should run small experiments as early as possible. These experiments act like searchlights, showing us where truth lies and where we are only dreaming. The first step in experimentation is asking the right questions. Instead of, can we build this product? The better question is, should we build this product? Can it solve a real problem for people? Will customers pay for it? Does it create value that matters? These are the questions that experiments help to answer. One of the strongest tools in this process is the concept of the minimum viable product, or MVP. This is not the final product with every feature and design element. It is the simplest version of the idea that can be tested with real customers. For example, instead of building a complete app, a startup might create a simple landing page or a short video that explains the product. If customers show strong interest, that interest is evidence that the idea might be worth pursuing further. Experiments in startups are not about proving that the founders are right. They are about learning. A failed experiment does not mean failure of the startup. It means that one assumption was wrong, and now we know better. Each experiment, whether successful or not, brings clarity. Step by step, the vision evolves into something that truly fits the market. Another important part of experimentation is speed. The longer it takes to test an idea, the more resources are wasted if the idea turns out to be wrong. Startups must design experiments that are quick, cheap, and effective. The goal is not to get perfect answers, but to get useful information fast. The lean startup approach also teaches that experiments should be structured. A good experiment has a clear hypothesis, a way to test it, and measurable results. For example, instead of saying, customers will love this feature, a testable statement would be, at least 20% of visitors will sign up for our email list after watching our demo video. This can be tested, and the data will either confirm or challenge the belief. History is filled with startups that succeeded because they ran smart experiments. Dropbox, for example, used a simple demo video before building its file-sharing product. That video generated so much interest that the team knew they were solving a real problem. On the other hand, many startups that ignored experimentation spent years building complex products that nobody wanted. The lesson is clear. Experiments are the engine that moves a startup forward. They prevent us from falling in love with our own ideas and force us to face reality. They give us a way to learn faster than the competition and to discover what customers truly value. And this leads us to the next step in the lean startup journey: After we design and run experiments, there comes a moment of courage. We must decide when to take a leap. Experiments reduce uncertainty, but they cannot eliminate it completely. There is always a gap between what we know and what we must believe. That is where the next chapter takes us. The leap is about turning insights into bold action. Chapter 5. Leap. In the journey of a startup, experiments help reduce uncertainty, but they cannot erase it completely. At some point, entrepreneurs face a moment of truth. They must take a leap. This leap is not blind faith, but a decision based on the best learning so far. It is the step where vision meets evidence and courage. Every great company starts with a leap of faith. Think of Airbnb. In the early days, the idea of strangers sleeping in someone else's home sounded crazy. But the founders believed in their vision. They did not know if people would trust such a service, yet they took the leap to test it in the real world. That leap was what turned an uncertain dream into a global movement. The lean startup method calls these leaps leap of faith assumptions. These are the most critical beliefs that hold a business model together. They are usually about two things. First, the value hypothesis. Does the product or service actually deliver value to customers? Second, the growth hypothesis. How will the product spread to new users and markets? If these assumptions are wrong, no matter how good the idea looks on paper, the startup will fail. This is why experiments matter so much. They help validate or reject these leap of faith assumptions before too many resources are spent. But experiments alone cannot carry the company forward. There comes a moment when the founder must say, "Yes, this is worth building further." That decision is the leap. Taking a leap is risky. It means committing energy, money, and time into something that is not fully certain. But without that leap, there is no progress. Startups cannot stay forever in testing mode. At some point, they must act. The key is to leap wisely, not blindly. A wise leap happens when entrepreneurs have gathered enough evidence to justify the risk. For example, if early tests show that a significant number of people are willing to pay for a product, then the leap might be to build a more complete version. If early adopters spread the word quickly, then the leap might be to scale marketing. Each leap should be grounded in data, not just dreams. Another challenge is knowing when not to leap. Many founders rush forward because of excitement, ignoring the signals from experiments. Others wait too long, afraid of making mistakes. The lean startup teaches balance. The leap must be bold enough to move forward, but smart enough to be guided by learning. There is also a human side to the leap. It requires conviction. A founder must inspire the team, investors, and even customers to believe in the vision. This is where leadership plays a crucial role. People follow confidence and clarity. A strong leap of faith, backed by evidence, can rally everyone around a shared mission. And remember, not all leaps succeed. Some will fail, but failure is not the end. Every leap, whether successful or not, produces new learning. That learning becomes fuel for the next experiment and the next step. In this way, progress is made, not in a straight line, but in a series of leaps and corrections. The leap is the heartbeat of entrepreneurship. It transforms knowledge into action. It turns what if into let's do it. Without it, experiments are just data points. With it, those data points become the foundation of a living business. But once we leap, the journey does not stop. We must continue testing and refining. That brings us to the next chapter, where the focus shifts to testing assumptions more deeply. After the leap comes the responsibility to test, to ensure that the chosen path is truly leading to value and growth. Chapter 6. Test. After the leap of faith, the next step is testing. A leap is necessary to move forward, but without testing, a leap can quickly turn into a fall. Testing gives the founder and the team the evidence they need to know if their direction is correct. In the lean startup method, testing is not about asking customers what they want. It is about observing what they actually do. Many entrepreneurs make the mistake of relying only on opinions. They show their idea to friends, family, or even potential customers, and hear positive words. People often say, "Yes, that sounds good," But when it comes time to buy or use the product, their behavior changes. Real testing removes this gap between words and actions. It focuses on customer behavior, not customer promises. One of the most powerful tools for testing is the concept of the minimum viable product, or MVP, which we discussed earlier. The MVP allows us to test the core assumption with the least effort. But an MVP alone is not enough. It must be followed by a clear method of measuring results. If customers sign up, purchase, or engage with the MVP, that is evidence. If they ignore it, that is also evidence. Testing also means being clear about what is being tested. For example, a team might believe that customers will pay for faster delivery of groceries. Instead of building an entire logistics network, they could test by offering a small batch of products in one neighborhood with same-day delivery. The test is focused and simple, yet it gives strong signals about whether people value speed enough to pay extra. A good test has 3 elements. First, a clear hypothesis. Second, a way to measure results. Third, a decision rule about what success or failure looks like. Without these, testing becomes messy and confusing. A bad test might generate numbers, but numbers without meaning are noise. The purpose of testing is to reduce uncertainty and guide the next step. Another important aspect of testing is honesty. Founders often fall in love with their ideas. When data shows the opposite of what they expected, they find excuses. This is dangerous. Lean startup demands discipline. The role of testing is not to prove that we are right, but to show us the truth. If the truth is uncomfortable, we must face it. Otherwise, we risk wasting years building something nobody wants. Testing also requires speed. The faster we test, the quicker we learn. Startups do not have unlimited time or resources. A slow test can be as damaging as a wrong one. This is why small, rapid, low-cost tests are essential. They create a feedback loop where learning happens continuously. Companies that succeed long-term often build a culture of constant testing. Amazon, for example, is famous for running thousands of experiments at the same time. Every detail, from the design of a button to the way delivery works, is tested. This culture allows the company to adapt quickly to customer needs and stay ahead of competitors. But testing alone is not enough. Once we gather data, we must measure it in the right way. Vanity metrics, numbers that look good but mean little, can easily mislead us. Real progress requires actionable metrics. And this brings us to the next chapter, which focuses on the science of measurement. How do we know that the tests are telling us something useful? How do we turn raw data into insight? That is where measurement becomes the next powerful step in the lean startup journey. Chapter 7. Measure. Once we begin testing, the next challenge is measurement. Numbers are powerful, but they can also be dangerous if used the wrong way. Many startups celebrate metrics that look exciting, but do not actually tell them if the business is working. These are called vanity metrics. Vanity metrics might include the number of downloads, website hits, or followers on social media. They look impressive, but they do not answer the most important question. Is the startup creating real value and real growth? The lean startup method insists on using actionable metrics instead of vanity metrics. Actionable metrics show a clear cause and effect. For example, if you run an experiment where you change the design of your product page, an actionable metric would show whether more people actually purchased the product after the change. This type of data can guide decisions. To make measurement useful, Lean Startup introduces the concept of innovation accounting. This is a system for tracking progress when traditional accounting fails. In normal businesses, success is measured by profit and revenue. But in startups, those numbers often do not exist yet. Innovation accounting breaks progress into 3 steps. Step 1 is establishing a baseline. This means measuring where the startup stands today. For example, how many customers are currently signing up? How many are paying? How many keep using the product after 1 month? These numbers are the starting point. Step 2 is tuning the engine. Here, experiments are designed to improve the baseline numbers. Maybe a new feature increases signups. Maybe faster service increases customer retention. Each experiment should show movement in the key metrics. Step 3 is deciding whether to pivot or persevere. If the experiments keep improving the metrics, then the startup is moving in the right direction and should persevere. But if the metrics remain flat despite many efforts, then it may be time to pivot, which means changing direction. The discipline of measurement keeps entrepreneurs honest. It prevents them from chasing illusions. For example, a startup may celebrate reaching 1 million app downloads. But if only a few thousand people use the app regularly, the business is not truly growing. Actionable metrics cut through the noise and show reality. Another tool that helps in measurement is cohort analysis. Instead of looking at overall numbers, cohort analysis studies groups of customers who joined at the same time. This reveals patterns. For example, if customers from January keep using the product for months, but customers from March quit quickly, that shows something changed. Maybe a new update confused users, or a marketing campaign brought in the wrong audience. Cohort analysis tells the deeper story hidden in the numbers. Startups that master measurement gain clarity. They know what works, what does not, and why. They are not distracted by hype or false confidence. They build step by step, guided by evidence. But even with measurement, a startup must eventually make a critical decision. Should it stay on the current path, or should it change direction? This is the moment of pivot or persevere, one of the hardest choices an entrepreneur will ever face. And that is the subject of the next chapter. Chapter 8. Pivot or persevere. In every startup journey, there comes a moment when the path forward is not clear. Experiments have been run. Data has been measured. Metrics reveal the truth. Now, the founder must make a critical choice: to persevere on the current course, or to pivot and change direction. This decision can define the future of the company. Persevering means continuing on the path you have been following because the evidence shows progress. Metrics are improving. Customers are responding. The experiments confirm that the product is solving a real problem. In this case, the startup doubles down on what is working. Resources are focused. The team builds on the momentum. Confidence is backed by evidence, not just hope. Pivoting is different. It is a structured change designed to test a new fundamental hypothesis about the product, strategy, or business model. Pivot does not mean failure. It means learning. It means adapting to reality. A pivot might involve targeting a different customer segment, changing the core product feature, exploring a new distribution channel, or even completely altering the business model. Many successful companies have pivoted at the right time. Twitter started as a podcast platform called Odeo. Instagram began as a location-based social app called Burbian. Both companies shifted focus after discovering what truly resonated with users. Pivots are not random guesses. They are informed decisions based on evidence from testing and measurement. Making the pivot or persevere decision requires courage and discipline. Entrepreneurs must resist the temptation to continue investing in a failing idea simply because of sunk costs or emotional attachment. This is where lean startup principles shine. The focus is always on validated learning. If learning shows that the assumptions are wrong, the wise choice is to pivot. If learning confirms the assumptions, then it is time to persevere. The process begins with a clear understanding of what constitutes progress. Startups must establish milestones and metrics that reveal whether the strategy is working. Then, after enough testing cycles, leaders analyze the data to determine the right course. This is not a one-time decision, but a continuous process. Startups pivot, measure, learn, and decide again and again. Pivot or persevere is more than a business decision. It is a mindset. It teaches flexibility without abandoning vision. It teaches humility without losing ambition. It reinforces the principle that entrepreneurship is a journey of discovery, not a straight line toward a predetermined outcome. Once the pivot or persevere decision is made, startups face the next challenge: how to scale, grow, and accelerate. Lean startup does not end at learning and adaptation. It continues into growth. The next part of the book, Accelerate, shows how to take validated learning and turn it into sustainable momentum. Here, principles of batch work, growth, adaptation, And innovation guides startups to move faster while avoiding waste. With the path chosen, whether through perseverance or a successful pivot, the startup is ready to accelerate. It is ready to turn insight into action, experimentation into scale, and learning into lasting impact. Part 3. Accelerate. The journey of a startup does not end with learning, testing, and deciding whether to pivot or persevere. Once the direction is clear, the challenge becomes speed. How can a startup grow, adapt, and innovate faster than the competition while still avoiding waste? This is the heart of Part 3. Accelerate. Acceleration is about turning validated learning into action at scale. It is about moving quickly, but intelligently. Every process, every experiment, and every decision must be designed to maximize learning and minimize wasted effort. Startups that accelerate effectively can achieve remarkable growth without losing the discipline that made them successful in the first place. In this part, we will explore practical strategies for scaling the startup. From working in small batches to driving sustainable growth, adapting continuously, and fostering innovation, each principle is designed to increase speed and efficiency. It is where the lean startup method moves from theory to high-velocity practice. The first step in accelerating is understanding the power of small batches. By breaking work into smaller, manageable units, startups can test, learn, and adjust faster. This principle will be explored in Chapter 9. Batch, where we learn how small, focused efforts create bigger, faster results. Chapter 9. Batch. In most traditional businesses, work is done in large batches. Products are developed in full before being tested. Marketing campaigns are launched at scale before seeing how customers respond. Manufacturing happens in huge quantities. This approach assumes that predictions are accurate and mistakes are costly but manageable. Startups, however, cannot afford this luxury. Uncertainty is high. Resources are limited. Mistakes are expensive. That is why Lean Startup emphasizes small batches. Batching in a startup is the practice of breaking work into the smallest possible units that still deliver value. Instead of building a complete product over months or years, startups build a simple version that can be tested quickly. Instead of analyzing an entire year of data, they test small changes and measure immediate effects. This allows for faster learning, quicker correction, and less waste. The power of small batches lies in speed. When work is divided into smaller units, mistakes are discovered earlier. Lessons are learned faster. Decisions can be made before too much effort has been wasted. A startup that works in large batches may discover a critical flaw only after months of work, costing time, money, and morale. Small batches create a rapid feedback loop, giving founders a constant pulse on what works and what does not. Small batches also encourage focus. When teams work on limited, well-defined tasks, they can concentrate fully on testing assumptions and learning. Each batch is designed to answer specific questions about the product, market, or customer behavior. This focus makes learning actionable, measurable, and practical. Another advantage of batching is flexibility. When experiments are run in small units, it is easier to pivot or adjust direction based on results. Large batches create inertia. The more resources invested in a single effort, the harder it becomes to change course, even when the evidence shows that the assumptions were wrong. Small batches make adaptation natural. Batch work is not just about product development. It applies to marketing, sales, and operational processes as well. Every part of the startup can be broken into experiments that are small, measurable, and rapid. This creates a culture of continuous improvement. Each small batch is a building block for sustainable growth. Many successful startups use small batches instinctively. For example, software companies release early versions of their apps to limited audiences, gather feedback, and improve. Retail startups test products in a single store or region before scaling nationwide. By focusing on small, rapid cycles, startups reduce risk, maximize learning, and accelerate progress. The principle of small batches is simple, but its impact is profound. It transforms uncertainty into manageable steps. It turns large, daunting tasks into achievable experiments. and it allows startups to move faster without sacrificing learning or quality. Once small batches are mastered, the next challenge is growth. Accelerating learning and testing is not enough if the startup cannot expand its reach. How do we scale experiments into growth that is sustainable and measurable? That is the focus of the next chapter, Grow, where we explore strategies to turn small wins into large-scale impact. Chapter 10. Grow. Once a startup has mastered small batches, the next challenge is growth. Growth is the engine that turns early learning into lasting impact. But growth is not simply about getting more users, more customers, or more revenue. It is about sustainable growth. Growth that is based on validated learning, not luck or hype. Lean Startup emphasizes that growth must be fueled by real customer behavior. Vanity metrics like downloads, clicks, or social media likes may look impressive, but they do not tell whether a startup is truly expanding. Sustainable growth comes from repeatable and predictable actions that demonstrate that customers find value in the product. There are 3 engines of growth that Lean Startup identifies: viral growth, sticky growth, and paid growth. Viral growth happens when existing users bring in new users, like when a messaging app encourages invitations. Sticky growth occurs when retention is high. Customers keep using the product because it solves a real problem. Paid growth comes from investing in marketing channels that produce a clear return on investment. Each engine relies on measurable outcomes and continuous learning. Growth also depends on speed. The faster a startup can learn what drives adoption and retention, the faster it can replicate that effect. Small batches allow startups to experiment with new strategies, test messaging, optimize pricing, and refine features. Each improvement adds up, creating a compounding effect over time. Another critical element of growth is feedback loops. The actions customers take should constantly inform the startup about what works and what does not. For example, if users stop engaging after a few days, this is a signal to improve onboarding or adjust the product. If a particular marketing message drives more signups, it becomes a guide for future campaigns. Growth is not just about adding customers. It is about understanding and responding to their behavior. Startups that grow effectively also avoid common pitfalls. Rapid expansion without learning can be dangerous. Scaling a product with untested assumptions leads to wasted resources and potential collapse. Lean Startup teaches that growth must be deliberate, measured, and guided by validated learning. Leadership plays a key role in sustaining growth. Founders must create a culture where experimentation, measurement, and adaptation are valued at every level. Teams must understand that growth is not about chasing vanity metrics, but about building a business that continuously creates value for customers. Once growth mechanisms are in place, the startup must focus on adaptation. Markets, technology, and customer needs change constantly. Even successful products can become obsolete if the company does not respond quickly. The next chapter, Adapt, explores how startups can remain flexible, adjust strategy, and continue learning even while scaling. It is the bridge between growth and long-term innovation, ensuring that momentum is maintained without losing the ability to change course when necessary. Chapter 11, Adapt. Growth is only valuable if a startup can adapt. Markets change, customer needs evolve, competitors emerge, technology shifts. A startup that cannot adjust risks stagnation, no matter how fast it initially grows. Adaptation is the process of using learning, measurement, and feedback to stay relevant and continue delivering value. Lean Startup teaches that adaptation is not a one-time decision. It is a continuous process built into every action. Every experiment, every metric, every interaction with customers provides information about whether the startup is aligned with reality. The organization must be ready to pivot or tweak strategy, product, or operations based on what it learns. Adaptation requires a mindset shift. Many traditional companies view change as disruption. Startups, however, thrive on it. They recognize that early mistakes, customer feedback, and shifts in behavior are opportunities to refine their product or business model. Flexibility becomes a core competency, not an afterthought. One way to adapt effectively is through continuous deployment and iteration. Instead of waiting months to release a new product version, startups release improvements in small increments. Each release is measured and evaluated, creating a rapid learning loop. This allows teams to identify problems early, improve features based on real user behavior, and respond to market trends before competitors can react. Adaptation also depends on leadership. Founders must foster a culture that embraces change and values evidence over ego. Teams must feel safe to challenge assumptions, question results, and propose new ideas. When adaptation is embedded in the culture, the organization becomes resilient, capable of responding quickly to uncertainty. Metrics and feedback loops are critical tools for adaptation. Cohort analysis, customer retention rates, usage patterns, and engagement data reveal where the product succeeds and where it needs adjustment. Decisions are not based on opinions, but on evidence, ensuring that adaptation is guided by reality, not speculation. Adaptation is closely tied to scaling. As the startup grows, small problems can become large bottlenecks. Processes that worked for a team of 5 may fail for a team of 50. Systems must evolve alongside growth, maintaining flexibility while supporting more users, more transactions, and more complexity. Lean startup principles, small batches, experimentation, measurement, remain essential, even at scale. Finally, adaptation prepares the startup for sustained innovation. It ensures that the organization remains agile, continuously learning, and ready to explore new opportunities. The ability to adapt quickly distinguishes startups that survive and thrive from those that fail despite early success. Once adaptation becomes a habit, the stage is set for the final principle: innovation. Innovation is the engine that turns learning, growth, and adaptation into breakthrough products and services. The next chapter, Innovate, explores how startups can continuously create new value, stay ahead of competition, and maintain long-term momentum. Chapter 12, Innovate. Innovation is the heartbeat of a successful startup. It is more than creating a new product or feature. True innovation is the ability to continuously discover, deliver, and refine value for customers while adapting to change. Lean Startup teaches that innovation is not accidental. It is a systematic process grounded in learning, testing, measuring, and adapting. At its core, innovation begins with solving real problems. Customers often cannot articulate exactly what they need, so the entrepreneur must use observation, feedback, and experimentation to uncover pain points. Each experiment, each small batch, each iteration contributes to this discovery. Innovation grows out of validated learning, not wishful thinking. Speed is critical in innovation. Markets evolve quickly. Competitors emerge. Technology changes. The startup that can experiment rapidly, learn fast, and implement solutions effectively gains an advantage. Small batches and continuous deployment, principles explored in earlier chapters, allow startups to test bold ideas without committing massive resources up front. This reduces risk while increasing the chances of breakthrough discoveries. Innovation is also a team effort. A startup thrives when every team member understands the importance of curiosity, experimentation, and data-driven decisions. Leadership must create a culture where creative ideas are encouraged, tested, and refined. Failure is seen not as defeat, but as insight, guiding the next iteration or experiment. Another key aspect of innovation is scalability. Discovering a great idea is just the beginning. The startup must design systems, processes, and strategies that allow the innovation to reach many customers efficiently. Scaling innovation requires discipline, measurement, and adaptation at every step. A brilliant idea that cannot be delivered reliably or profitably will fail to create lasting impact. Lean Startup emphasizes that innovation is ongoing. A startup cannot rest on past successes. Customer expectations evolve, technology advances, and markets shift. Continuous innovation ensures that the company remains relevant and competitive. It is a cycle of experimenting, measuring, adapting, and improving. The ultimate goal of innovation is creating lasting value. When a startup innovates effectively, it not only solves problems, but also builds trust, loyalty, and momentum. Customers recognize the value and share it with others. Teams stay motivated, knowing that their work is meaningful. Investors see growth backed by evidence. The startup becomes more than a temporary project. It becomes a resilient, evolving business. With innovation embedded in the DNA of the company, startups can accelerate sustainably, adapt continuously, and scale successfully. Every principle from Part 3, batchwork, growth, adaptation, and innovation, works together to create a high-velocity engine for progress. Having explored innovation, the journey of the lean startup comes full circle. The final lesson is about avoiding waste. How do we ensure that every effort, every experiment, every resource is used effectively? The epilogue, Waste Not, ties together all the principles and reminds us that efficiency, learning, and discipline are as critical as vision and courage. Epilogue, Waste Not. The journey of a startup is full of uncertainty, risk, and constant learning. Throughout the lean startup method, one principle is clear: nothing should be wasted. Waste comes in many forms: time, money, effort, or even ideas. Startups that fail often do so not because the vision was wrong, but because resources were used inefficiently. Waste reduces speed, limits learning, and increases the risk of failure. Waste can take subtle forms: building features nobody uses, running marketing campaigns that do not convert, hiring before understanding the real needs of the business. These are not just mistakes. They are lost opportunities. Lean Startup teaches that every action must have purpose. Every experiment must teach something. Every dollar spent should be an investment in validated learning. The concept of waste also extends to human energy. Teams that work long hours on untested ideas or projects that do not align with the company's vision burn out quickly. Motivation, creativity, and morale decline. Lean Startup emphasizes working smarter, not harder. Small batches, fast experiments, and evidence-based decisions preserve energy and focus while accelerating progress. Measurement is key to identifying waste. Vanity metrics can mask inefficiency. Actionable metrics show where efforts are paying off and where they are not. A feature that takes months to build but is barely used is wasted effort. A marketing campaign that costs thousands but generates no new paying customers is wasted money. Measurement turns waste into insight. Pivot or persevere decisions are also connected to reducing waste. Continuing on a path that is not working consumes resources without learning. A timely pivot redirects energy toward a strategy that has higher chances of success. Persevering when the data supports it ensures that effort is concentrated where it matters most. Innovation, growth, and adaptation, all principles from Part 3, are also about minimizing waste. Continuous deployment and small batches reduce the risk of building the wrong thing. Growth strategies are designed to focus on sustainable customer acquisition. Adaptation prevents stagnation and ensures that work is aligned with real market needs. Innovation ensures that efforts create value, not just activity. The epilogue reminds us that waste is inevitable if startups ignore the lessons of lean startup. But waste can be minimized through discipline, evidence, and focus. Every experiment should answer a question. Every feature should solve a problem. Every team member should work toward learning and delivering value. At its heart, lean startup is a philosophy of efficiency. It is about doing more with less, learning faster, and turning uncertainty into opportunity. Vision and courage drive a startup forward, but without discipline and focus, the journey can easily falter. Waste not, and the startup becomes not only a business, but a learning organization, capable of adapting, innovating, and growing sustainably. By embracing this mindset, entrepreneurs can maximize the impact of every decision, every dollar, and every action. Lean Startup is not just a method for building businesses, it is a guide for creating value while preserving the precious resources of time, energy, and capital. Start smart, learn fast, act decisively, and waste nothing. The Lean Startup journey ends here, but its principles are timeless. Start, define, learn, experiment, leap, test, measure, pivot or persevere, batch, grow, adapt, innovate, and always waste not. Follow these steps, and a startup is no longer a gamble. It becomes a disciplined path towards sustainable success. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lean startup and want more practical insights, stories, and summaries delivered straight to you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon to stay updated and join our journey of learning and growth every week.